Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Human Rights Defender Project to be part of the Detained Court Observation Initiative. The Advocates for Human Rights, Robbins Kaplan, the Center for New Americans, Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, the University of St. Thomas Law School Clinic, Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, and numerous other partners, including the American Immigration Lawyers Association's Minnesota Dakotas chapter, all are collaborating to come together to make sure that we are providing defense to people who are going to be detained and deported, who face a bewildering system on their own and who desperately need legal representation to make sure that their human rights are respected. We are looking forward to engaging you both as a volunteer observer, as a trainee in deportation defense, and as somebody who is helping our volunteers in shadowing and understanding what can be an often intimidating, but really is an accessible process for attorneys to make a real difference. The goals of this project really are to bring about transparency into what can be a very opaque, inaccessible system for people, to hold our government agencies accountable for any human rights violations that are happening in immigration court, including violations of due process and other problems in accessing justice for people who are seeking protection from deportation, to make sure that we as a legal community are able to identify needs and trends as they're emerging in this rapidly evolving world of the post-executive order landscape for our clients, and for many of you to provide orientation as volunteers who are maybe interested in representing what we anticipate to be a growing number of people detained in immigration custody. The detained immigration court system is relatively simple, and we wanted to give you an overview quickly of the players involved in that system. The first agency involved is the U.S. Department of Justice. The Executive Office for Immigration Review, what we fondly call EOR, is actually the immigration court, and immigration judges, or IJs, hear cases of removal proceedings for people in immigration detention. IJ decisions are reviewed by another branch of EOR, the Board of Immigration Appeals, so every decision that's taken by an immigration judge may be appealed to the BIA. The other player in the room when you walk into the immigration court in detention is the Department of Homeland Security. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is represented by the Office of Chief Counsel. That is an attorney who's prosecuting the removal case against the respondent. Our clients, or the people appearing in immigration court facing detention and deportation, are actually called respondents in these proceedings, and so you'll see those three players: the judge, or IJ, the OCC attorney, or prosecutor, and the alien, the respondent in the proceedings. Hearing mechanics are really very simple. These are administrative hearings that you should recognize as an attorney. We're currently having hearings held 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we understand that this will be 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, beginning probably in March. It could be sooner. The location of these hearings take place at the Whipple Building at 1 Federal Drive, Suite 1850, out at Fort Snelling, Minnesota. This is easily accessible both by car and on the light rail system, but you do need a photo ID to enter the grounds and to enter the building. Detention centers where our clients may be located include Carver, Freeborn, and Sherburne County jails. And so that's another part of this project that we hope to get you involved in as things move along. The types of proceedings that you might see out at the Detained Master Calendar, the Detained Court, include master calendar hearings. Those are individual initial appearances made by respondents to either schedule additional hearings or to plead to deportation charges and be removed from the United States. Individual calendar hearings are trials on the merits of the applications for relief from deportation. So we refer to these two calendars, the master calendar and the individual calendar, as different proceedings. The master calendar hearings usually are group hearings Individual calendar hearings are usually scheduled for several hours and include arguments on the relief that an individual is seeking, testimony, and will usually involve a decision by the immigration judge at the conclusion of the hearing. You may also be present in the courtroom for bond hearings. Bond redetermination proceedings happen by immigration judges, and so you may hear arguments about people's eligibility for bond or release from detention. There are also hearings that might be held for people who have been denied credible fear or reasonable fear determinations when they are seeking entry into the United States as asylum seekers or returning permanent residents or returning citizens. Sometimes there are proceedings that are held for those people at the port of entry, and if they want to appeal those decisions, they can sometimes come in front of an immigration judge. Reasonable fear hearings also may be held for people who are permanent residents or others who are facing deportation because of criminal charges, but have a fear of return to their home country. These are different kinds of proceedings that you may encounter, and on the observation form, you'll be seeing a place to check which proceeding your client is in. Issues of concern that we have particularly, and why we're inviting volunteers to participate in this project, relate to primarily access to counsel for people in immigration detention. Everybody appearing in immigration court has the right to an attorney, but that right is at no expense to the government. So we see many, many people facing detention and deportation in complex hearings without access to an attorney. We want to know how many people are represented and make sure that we can calibrate the volunteer need to the volume at the immigration court. We're also interested in tracking and making sure we understand when people have family and community support, the role that that might play on the proceedings, and the violation of people's rights to a fair proceeding when family or community support cannot be present, either because family members can't make it in the building because they don't have documentation, or because the person is detained here in Minnesota, far from family and community support elsewhere in the country. We're also particularly concerned about problems with interpretation or lack altogether of interpretation. Immigration court budgets often are low and mean that they don't order interpreters for every hearing. It's of course essential to due process that people understand the charges against them and the proceedings they're involved in. And we want to document and understand when interpretation is failing. We are also trying to get a handle on how people are ending up in detention in the first place. What's the manner of arrest? Where did they get arrested? What law enforcement agency made the arrest? Was it an immigration agent at a border, or was it a local police department who turned the individual over to the immigration agencies? So we'll be asking you to take note of that as well, if you can determine that from the hearing in front of you. And of course, we want to be looking at people's ability to raise defenses to their deportation. Is it possible in the proceeding that you're observing for the person to adequately defend against being deported? Are options explained to them? Are they given time to find an attorney? Are they giving up on their hearing because of the length of detention rather than staying with the proceedings and attempting to raise those defenses and stay here in the United States? So these are some of the concerns, the reasons why we've asked you to volunteer and be part of this project. How do we do this? This is, of course, like everything happening right now, a work in progress. So please expect to need flexibility and that processes might change. And you can stay tuned to this website so that you'll be able to get up-to-date information and know what's happening. But what we're envisioning is that you will sign up for a hearing observation slot. These will be in reasonable chunks of time, probably 2-hour slots. And when you sign up, you'll be told by email where to meet people, either in front of the courtroom so you can observe the initial screening that happens by the volunteer attorneys out there at the detained immigration court right or where to go, whether to go directly to a courtroom. So you'll get that information when you sign up for your hearing slot. If you're a person who's anchoring the project already and are expecting hearing observers out at the court, you too will know whether there will be people coming out that you should keep an eye out for, or whether there are no observers for that day. We're going to ask you to download a hearing observation guide that you can fill out for each individual hearing that you're looking at. This guide will be something that will record your name and the observation date, which judge, which chief counsel's office representative is there, will correlate to numbers on the detained court docket, so we'll know and be able to tell which hearings these related to. We'll ask about the proceedings, bond, master calendar, continued hearings, individual hearings, credible fear review, all of those proceedings, so we know what you're observing. We want to know if the respondent is male or female. This is related to the detention facilities, and we want to track whether there's increases in detained dockets for women in detention. This impacts where people are heard and where we can deploy resources effectively. We also want to know what jail people are being held at, so you'll see check boxes for that. Where the person actually lives outside of detention. Are they somebody who's from the Twin Cities, Minnesota, the upper Midwest, or are you seeing people in detained court who are from other parts of the country? This relates to patterns that ICE uses to transfer people relating to bed space and other issues. We of course want to know if people have attorneys already. We have an active and engaged immigration bar here in the upper Midwest, and we have great attorneys out there representing clients who can afford to pay counsel. So we are looking for who's out there and whether people are getting hooked up with attorneys at the front end of the case, so we can again address gaps in service delivery. We'll ask you to take a look at whether the person has any support people in the audience, whether they have family, friends, community members, employers, others, so that, again, we get a sense of how we can support people coming into proceedings and making their best case. Questions about interpretation and whether interpreters are provided at all or in the appropriate language need to be noted. There will be a section asking how the person was taken into custody. This will be important for us to, again, understand where things are going wrong out in the field and deploy resources to prevent people from ending up in detention in the first place. And then the results of the hearing and any general observations. So you'll work through each case with this guide and then complete that guide and turn it back into the Advocates for Human Rights. And you'll receive a link on how to upload that information to us. Nothing you will be noting in the observation guide will be client confidential information, so you will be able to just report and get those forms back to us. They will correlate with docket numbers, so we'll be able to follow up on individual cases if necessary. Now, we are incredibly grateful for the tremendous outpouring of support from our legal community here in Minnesota. We have seen volunteers coming out in the hundreds to represent people at the airport, to step forward to defend the human rights of immigrants and refugees in our community. You are part of this team, and we cannot do this work without you. Thank you so much.